So this demonstration is showing you the different cutting techniques that you can use. I'm going to be using a carrot as an example. So what I'm going to need for this is a sharp knife, a spoon, you can use any type of cutlery for this, a peeler, and I'm also going to use a cocktail stick as well. So I've got a paper towel just to be able to put all of my vegetable cuttings on. If you're doing this at home, then obviously you can put them straight into your compost bin. Okay, so peeling the carrot first of all, always peel away from yourself. This will just get rid of any of the kind of skin around the outside. Depending on what time of year, carrots, if they're in season, then you don't need to actually peel them. The skin is a really good source of fibre. Okay, so taking those bits off, collect them up. Just take the top off your carrot and the bottom, and then you can throw that into the bin or into your compost bin. When you're cutting your carrot, I'm going to be showing you 4 different techniques. I'm going to be showing you the julienne technique, batonette, slicing and dicing. So if we start off with the most simple one, we're going to start off with slicing. So when you're holding onto the carrot, obviously you want it on a sort of a smooth, clean surface. You're going to cut down onto your carrot, doing a gentle rocking action like this. If you just hack away at it, then you're going to end up blunting your knife, but you're also going to end up with rough edges. Now, most people would say that slicing a carrot is very easy, and it is, but what we're looking for is precision. So you can see the piece that I've cut already. It's really narrow at one end and it's much thicker at the other end. If you were going to a restaurant, this wouldn't be acceptable to serve there. If you're cooking it at home, then obviously it's fine. But what we're going to try and do today is show you how to do this so that you can be really, really precise. So when you're cutting it then, you can, in this instance, use a ruler if you wanted to measure their exact. Or you can just use the piece that you've cut before just to mark how wide you want it to be. So again, cutting straight down in that rocking action, you can see it split off a little bit there, which means that it's much, much wider at one end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be really careful, cut off that extra bit, and I'm going to cut 3 or 4 sliced carrot pieces. Now, I've got a sheet here, which I'm using just to put my different pieces of carrot on, just so you can see the examples. So I'm going to put my sliced pieces of carrot on here. Now obviously they're going to be different in diameter, because as the carrot goes further up towards where the tip would be, obviously it's going to be much thicker. That's fine. The next one I'm going to show you then is I'm going to show you the batonette. Now batonette, to do this, I'm going to chop off a piece of my carrot, because I don't need that just at the moment. And I'm going to use this thicker piece to create the batonette. Now to create a batonette, the easiest way to do is to cut your carrot in half lengthways. So again, trying to use that rocking action, because that way you're working with a flat surface. If you're working with the round surface, it's going to rock and it's going to be difficult to cut. So once you've done that, I'm now going to be really careful using my claw grip. I'm going to cut off the edges so that you end up with a straight line, and do the same on the other side as well. Okay, so what you're left with is sort of a larger chunk. Now you can see here that this end's narrower than this end, so I need to level that up a little bit. So again, being careful, using your claw grip, mind your fingers, level it up so that it's the same on one end to the other. Once you've done that, you can then turn it over, and can you see that you've got a nice flat edge here, but you've got a risen edge up here. What we want to try and do is level that off as well. So again, using your claw grip, just carefully level that off. So you end up with a sort of much more rectangular shape. So we're not finished yet. Obviously the ends, as you look at them, you can see that it's not level. So it's much longer on this side than it is on this side. So we need to square these up. So again, this time we're going to use a variation of our bridge hold. So holding onto the piece of carrot with both fingers, you're going to carefully cut down the center of your carrot so that you end up with 2 pieces. So again, you can check them when they're side by side. These are the kind of ones that you might buy from the supermarket. You use them with dips and things like that, but they also are served in cooking. Okay, check them from both sides. Are they square? Now if you're being really fussy, you can see that they're slightly off. So you might want to trim them just a little bit more, just to make sure that you get that really even finish, like that. So that is a simple way to do a batonette. Now the next one that I'm going to show you is your dicing. So with the second piece of carrot that you've got, we're going to repeat the process of the batonette by taking off the edges like that. And again, we're going to go through the same process of trying to level it out. So you can see it's still narrower here than it is here. So mind your fingers when you're doing this. And we're just going to start to trim it down so that it's roughly the same sort of shape. Now, it looks a bit of an odd shape at the moment, and that's because it's completely wonky that way. So moving those bits out of the way. Again, hold on to it, cut down, and we're going to try and square this off a little bit more. Now you might ask, what is the point of doing this? The reason why is because we are looking for precision. So if you're thinking of going into a GCSE class to do this, we are going to be looking for precision cutting. It's one of the 12 skills that we teach you. So I'm not saying you have to do this for everything that you're cooking. So for example, if you're cutting vegetables up to put in a stew or a casserole, you wouldn't need to be this accurate. But if you were serving them as a side dish, then we would expect you to be looking at your precision and accuracy when you're cutting. Okay, so turning the back over again, we're going to do the same as what we did with the batonette. We're going to cut down the middle to create a batonette shape again, but this time we're going to take it one step further. This time I'm going to start to chop them into smaller cubes. So dicing is putting your carrot into cube pieces. So this time again I'm going to carefully cut them, and again, if you're being really accurate, put one piece on top of the other like that, so you can see the sizes and how big you want them to be. Now this may take you a while to do when you first start doing it, because you do sort of have to measure them up. But as you get more used to doing it, and you get more practice doing it, it will become much quicker. You see these chefs who are doing it really, really quickly, they are using exactly the same technique as I'm showing you today, it's just they've had much more practice so they can do it quicker. So when we put our dice pieces together, you can see that there's a few irregularities. This one, for example, is much, much smaller than this one. So what I would do is, obviously, going with the smallest one, I would work out what I'd need to do in order to make that one smaller. So again, just carefully use your fingers to sort of stop it from moving. You're going to start to trim them down so they start to look more the same size. Now when you're dicing, you can make the carrot pieces as small as you like. Obviously the smaller they are, the fiddlier they are, but you start to see that they're looking a lot more accurate. So those are going to go into our diced pile. You don't need loads of examples of each, but just enough to show you the technique. Now the last one we're going to look at is the julienne. Now you can buy tools in order to cut julienne carrots, but I'm going to show you the manual way of doing it. I'm going to use my last little bit of batonette that I've got here. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on very carefully to the edges, and I'm going to really thinly slice it. So when you're slicing, the difference between slicing and cutting is cutting, you're sort of doing a downward rocking motion, and you're putting pressure on it that way. With slicing, you're running it along the length of the carrot like this. So again, mind your fingers when you're doing this. You will end up with a thicker bit, obviously, because otherwise you're going to cut your fingers if you go too close to it, because it's just going to wobble. So don't worry about that for the moment. So when you've got your sliced pieces, what we're going to do, they're fine like this, but we're going to go one step further again, and we're going to slice them down the middle like this. And on the thicker pieces, you'll be able to get a little bit more out of them. There we go. Mind your fingers. And these are your julienne, so they're thin strips. Now if you're doing it by hand, obviously if you've got a larger knife it will be easier. If you're using a smaller knife like I am here, then it's absolutely fine to have them so that they are roughly sort of equal in size, but you can see the difference between the julienne. They're like small versions of the batonette. So in terms of its success criteria, what we're looking for is precision and neatness, so that they are the same in length, they are the same in size, all the way through. The only difference is, as I said, with the sliced ones, you might see here that this one looks bigger than this one, and that is purely just because the carrot from the tip to the root is going to be a slightly different size. So you don't need to worry about making those smaller. So that's what you're going to try. If you want to try this at home, you're looking for a julienne, a batonette, slicing and dicing, but see if there's any other techniques that you can find as well. Now the second part of the demonstration is we're going to have a look at decorative techniques. So once you've actually cut up your carrot pieces, there are other things that you can do as well. So for this, I'm going to use a serving plate. Now, if you can use one without a pattern on it, it does show up your food a lot better, and that's why a lot of restaurants use white plates, because they really show up the food that's on them. For this, I'm going to use a spring onion, and I'm also going to use my cocktail stick with a range of different squeezy bottle sauces. So I've got a spice mayonnaise, I've got a chili sauce, and you can also use some of the balsamic glaze as well. I wouldn't suggest balsamic vinegar just because it's too runny. So the reason why I had the spoon or you could use a fork or a blunt knife, never use a sharp knife for this, is to show you how you can actually start to curl the onion that we've got here. So again, I'm just going to chop the end off, because that's where the root is. If you've got what we call young spring onions, you don't actually need to worry about taking off this extra bit, because it's absolutely fine. As long as it's nice and crispy still, and it's still firm, then it's perfectly fine to eat. Just give it a wash before you eat it. But these are actually going to be used as decoration. So what I'm going to do for this, I'm just going to show you a couple of really simple techniques that you can do. Cutting off the top, so we've got the white bit here, which most people use, and they end up throwing most of this away. You can actually use this for decoration. This is the bit that would traditionally be used in sort of a salad. And again, you can do lots of different things with this. You can slice it, you can dice it, you can make julienne out of it. So all the techniques that I've already shown you. But one thing you can do is you can actually, again, being really careful because it's quite slippery sometimes, holding on to the top, try and avoid cutting the white bit because you want that to stay together in order to hold it together. Put your knife into sort of the top of the white part of the onion, and you're going to slice along up to the top so that you've got a break in the onion. You're then going to turn it around and do the same on the other side, so roughly the same sort of place. Now just be careful because it will try to move, so hold it in place like this. Okay, and you can see that it's starting to sort of fan out. Now with a spring onion, very similar to a standard onion that you might find, you can see that it's got this kind of layer on the inside. Now this is where the spoon comes in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the spoon almost like a curling ribbon. So I'm going to use the spoon just to pull up through there, and it will start to curl over. It's not going to give you the same effect as a ribbon, obviously, because a ribbon is plastic. This is a vegetable. But it will start to curl over, so it can start to give you some interesting shapes. So again, just using the blunt part of the handle, or again, if you're using a non-sharp knife like a table knife, you can do it for that. You don't have to do anything with it. You can literally just have it so that these edges are sort of spiked over. So just have a play about with it. It's just an idea, technique to show you. So curling those bits down like that. So if you've ever been to a restaurant, some Chinese restaurants do this and they do a fantastic job of it. It's food art really, where they carve into vegetables as well. That's another really good way that you can do it. Tomatoes are a really good way to start out if you're practicing doing that. But this just shows you some ways that you can start to curl it. You can see here these ones have curled quite nicely. This one's a little bit thicker, so it's not curling quite as well. And then you can always leave the top bits so that they're free like that. Again, just by putting that on the side of someone's plate, might look a bit strange on its own, but if you had a bowl of rice next to it, or you had something else with it, it just adds a little bit of finesse to your plate. With the other pieces that we've got here, again, there's no need to throw anything away because these are all edible. You might want to chop these end pieces off just because they're a little bit drier, but other than that, the whole of it is edible. So what you can actually do is you can start to slice up some circular shapes, and the good thing about spring onions is they're hollow, so you can fill them with things. So if you're making a sauce, for example, you could fill them with the different pieces of your spring onion. Like so. Now with the sauces, what you could do is taking your sauce, and it could be something like a chili sauce, it could be a mayonnaise, it could be anything that you want to use. You can then fill up these shapes, and again that means that they're not going to spread out all over your plate. It just adds a nice little point of decoration, but also it's a great little storage place, especially if you're using something like a hot sauce like this, because it just stops it from going all over the plate. Other things that you can do, again just showing you with the hot sauce, just because you can see it nice and clearly on the plate, is this is more commonly seen in things like desserts. You might want to do a sort of a basic shape like that. Perfectly fine to leave it like that if you wanted to, but what you can do is then you can use your cocktail stick. So you can start to do lines across it. So you might notice this, they tend to use it more in desserts than they do in savoury dishes, but you can start to drag the cocktail stick along the shape, and again it just gives you a point of interest. So if you were putting something, maybe a steak, something like that, on top of there, again it would just give you a point of focus. And then, as I said, you can use lots of different types of sauces. You can, if you wanted to, use your carrots for this. So I'm just going to use my julienne carrots. You might decide that you want to just do a really basic sort of lattice effect. really simple, really quick and easy to do, but it's just showing that you've put a little bit of care and thought into the food that you're presenting. Also as well, if you've there's young children in your family, they maybe don't like vegetables or fruit, this is a really good way to introduce them into a sort of slightly funner way of eating, so something that's a little bit more engaging for them. So it's a nice thing to do. So when you're making your food, it's a really nice way to present it. Think about how you're going to present your food. Think about how you're going to cut up your fruits or vegetables, and then think about how it's going to appear on the plate. So if you get a chance, have a look through the internet. Pinterest is another really good website that you can look at for different decorative techniques of food. These are just a few really simple ways that you can do it, just to make your plate look a little bit more appetizing.